When I look at like Reckful's last day of talking to people, I think he was saying like, all right, guys, like I'm going to go offline and then I'm going to, try to find something to watch and fall asleep. I don't know. I could be hearing this maybe, or I could be like totally inventing this. I acknowledge it. But when I hear him talk, he makes so many big reads on people without
hyper intellectualize them. So
Jesus.
What's your interpretation of it?
That consciousness creates reality. It's what the yogis have been saying for thousands of years.
This is so wrong, but
Okay.
I think that is fundamentally different. That is such a different experience than you wake up, the sun is shining, you don't really have anything to worry about, but it feels like there's just like an elephant standing on your chest and you have no idea why. You have no idea. You don't have any problems. Nothing is really going on that's bad. You don't have anything to look forward to that's going on. Like everything should be fine. But there's just like there's like something like sitting on your chest. And that kind of anxiety, I think, I hate. This is always one of my biggest like criticisms of psychology. He recorded this months ago.
I haven't seen any of these, but obviously I'm going to be judging the decision to try to treat him. I know Dr. K will claim that he was not trying to treat him, but I think he was. So the decision to continue to see him for online sessions, interviews, knowing he was suicidal, I'm obviously going to be judging that a little more harshly, knowing that he did eventually kill himself.
We good?
Yeah, man. So tell me, I've been living under a rock for many, many, many years. But
Yeah.
Stream Chat is telling me that you're the guy, you're Reckful Gladiator, right?
Yes.
That's you. Yeah. So I guess that makes me a fan, but from like a decade ago.
Yeah, that's most of my viewers. They're a fan from a decade ago.
So tell
That's
me
interesting.
what are we talking about today, buddy?
Well,
And what am I calling you Reckful?
You can call me Byron if you want.
What do you
But yeah, I've dealt with depression my whole life, pretty much. I mean, since I was like 14, and I'm 30
Okay.
now.
Okay.
And a bunch of people in my chat were telling me I should call you.
Okay.
So here I am.
Okay.
It's actually starting to get better just recently because I'm like working on a project with some friends, and it gives me a sense of purpose, I guess.
Okay.
But yeah, go ahead.
What's the project? And by the way, so a couple of ground rules. So I'm a psychiatrist, but I can't treat your depression over the internet. And by the way, so a couple of ground
All
rules.
right, so in the first 30 seconds, he's already telling him that it's starting to get better. Don't worry about me. I can handle it on my own. I think Reckful is a people pleaser. That, based on what he said and based on his mannerisms.
Yeah, okay. Talk a little. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh Jesus. Is this the first exposure that Max has to Byron's conversations? Because you could read Byron as a people pleaser, but there's like a few other ways you could read that too. It might just be the case that, one, he could be trying to alleviate Dr. K's concerns, like, oh, you don't have to treat me, right? We don't have to. It could be the case that he doesn't want to talk about his depression. Number two, sorry, I just read something in chat. TDS is Trump derangement syndrome, not the Donald Trump. Sorry, I don't know why I was saying the Donald Trump. Trump derangement syndrome. It could be the case that he genuinely is like being treated. He doesn't want to waste his time talking. There's a few different reasons why he could say that. Like, that's a pretty big jump to like automatically do like he's a people pleaser. I always get worried when Max makes assumptions like this because I don't know if he's going to be locked into that now for like the rest of his video viewing, and it's going to inhibit his ability to see other things. But we'll see.
1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Should be good. All right. Yeah, you can ask whatever you want, and if I don't want to answer it on stream,
don't
I just
answer.
won't, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So tell me, what do you mean by depression? Let's start there.
Well, I've been diagnosed with bipolar type 2.
Ah.
And when I was 6, my brother killed himself. He also had it.
How old was he?
He was 21. It's a very big age gap.
Okay.
And then because of that, when I've gone to get treated, they never give me SSRIs. I've never tried an SSRI. because he's tried an SSRI and then that happened after.
Okay.
Prozac.
Okay. Okay.
And I've tried a couple things. I've tried like I was on a really high dose of lithium at one point.
How did that make you feel?
Very bland. Yeah, the same thing people always say, like kind of dead. You know, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then God, I've tried a bunch of other ones, but they're not super memorable. One of them gave me like some eye pain, so I had to stop taking it because I was really sensitive to light. Maybe you know which one I'm talking about.
Okay.
Because I was really sensitive to light. Maybe you know which one I'm talking about.
Okay.
I don't know. I tried a bunch of different ones. This is like 14 years ago, most of it. So now I don't really remember.
Okay.
But
has medication ever been helpful?
I hope you guys got mad.
So the only thing that's been really helpful is when I was in Amsterdam, I took psilocybin, and it really worked for me.
You know, so this is fascinating. So the FDA.
Okay, we're 3 minutes in, and Dr.
Today,
K is talking about the FDA. He's talking about medication. He's asking him about his reaction to different drugs. This is a medical conversation. He is claiming he is not acting as a medical professional, but Reckful knows that Dr. K is in fact a doctor when he's having this conversation.
It's such an intense feeling. It's kind of hard to explain, but it let me get out of these like thought loops that I was in that were causing me to be sad.
Yep.
And I just step back and see things in a new perspective.
Okay. So today is supposed to be a stream about meditation, and Reckful, I'm going to ask you a couple of other questions, but if it's okay with you guys, we're going to talk about that and like what's happening in your mind and why psilocybin is helpful and how you can cultivate that sensation without using psilocybin.
Okay.
So the first thing is like this phrase, a thought loop, I love. So why don't you explain to people what is a thought loop?
Okay, you'd explain it better, but just certain things, you're going along through your day and a certain thing happens and it always causes you to think in the same pattern of a certain negative feeling at the end. And I always hear it described as, it's like an icy mountain with the sleds. A lot of sleds have gone down, and then there's these patterns of form that your mind tends to go down one of these paths of the sleds. Yep. And then when you're on psilocybin, it seems like it doesn't. It's just kind of free to think whatever.
Yeah, so... Okay. Yeah, so let's talk about thought loops for a second. So the first thing to understand is...
Okay, 4 minutes and 43 seconds in. If I were talking to Reckful, if I were his therapist, or if I were trying to be his fake therapist, where I'm at with him is that Reckful has a lot of trouble expressing anger. He's a people pleaser. He's nice. He's...
Oh, man. Oh, dude, fuck. I feel like I always take sides against Max in conversations, so I'm trying to look for areas where I can, like, support what he's saying. I don't want to do what... I'm about to do what he just did. But no, I don't think I am. I think I can make my statement with better judgment. So here's a piece of advice that I, as a loser fucking streamer, would give to therapists and people in general. And I think it's one of the reasons why sometimes people can get turned off by therapy or by talking to people is it's really, really important to be able to listen to people. And jumping to huge conclusions about why people act the way they do is probably one of the biggest turnoffs in talking to people. Whether you're talking about talking to a therapist or a friend or somebody else, that idea of like 5 minutes into a conversation, you're like, oh, this person is definitely a big people pleaser. I can tell that he blah, blah. It's like, well, hold on. Like, there could be a lot of other things going on. I don't know if we have all the information to make a statement like that strong yet. I think we need to collect way more data, not 5 seconds into a conversation. There's no way that you truly can ascertain that much of a person's personality. You have problems expressing anger? I don't buy that. I think that's way too strong a statement to make this early on in the conversation. But
it's anxious, and I would probably assume that at some point I need Reckful to get mad at me. I need to let him get mad at me, maybe even make him mad at me, and then I need to show him that it's okay for him to be mad at me. It's okay for him to be so mad that he hangs up on me. He tells me, fuck you, I never want to see you again.
I also, and maybe some of you are like this, I'm a pretty intelligent person, and, well, let me back up. if you have mental health issues and you're used to people trying to like peg you very quickly as a certain thing, you can also probably tell when people have pegged you as a certain thing. And if you feel like somebody is going in a certain direction and they've already made up their mind about you, I think it's very easy to just stop engaging with the person and like not like be like, oh, okay, you think this about me? Like, fuck you. Like, I'm not even going to try to, like, there's no point. And trying to railroad somebody down when in like 5 minutes you think you've already figured out like the key problems they have, trying to railroad them down that path is probably the worst possible thing you can do. If I had to guess, and this is going by like my experience with like 2 therapists and then just a little bit of common sense, I hate to say that, but like experience talking to people, my guess is going to be, and it's strange because I feel like Max has even said this before, my guess is going to be that for a good therapist, probably your entire first session is just going to be you sharing information to them without them really being able to say much at all. That would be like my guess. Like you're not going to be like in 6 minutes, like, oh yeah, like you've probably got this, this, and this, and I can help you with this. It's probably going to be like an hour of like you just like, oh, well, tell me about your childhood, tell me about this, tell me about that, tell me about that, tell me about that. You know, that would be my guess.
And then the next week at our next scheduled session, I am still there. That is my impression based on the little I've seen.
Are you saying Dr. K is doing that? Well, no, I'm saying that's what you should be doing. It seems like Dr. K is just chatting right now. Dr. K seems like he's pretty good at having chill No, actually, no. He pushes pretty hard. He tries to get to something in about an hour and a half. He really does push. But it feels like he's generally just when he does it. I mean, like, there is room for criticism of how Dr. K functions, though, for sure. I'm not going to say he's beyond reproach. But this here of, like, Max trying to, like, have everything figured out of, like, Byron's, like, big problems, like, 5 minutes in, that's way too early. It's way too early to make those big assumptions about somebody, I think. But let's see.
Of Dr. K so far, just I think one full session with Melina and some short clips.
Wait, Max is just saying that that's where he is at, not that he's right about it. Well, Max is, hold on, you're wrong. I'm sorry. Hold on. Max is saying that he's figured this much out about Byron, and if he was having a conversation with him, this is what he would say and try to do because he's figured out Byron's problems. That's what he's saying. That's just his impression. No, hold on. You're wrong. Sorry. I'm instant banning. I'm not gonna argue with fucking like retards in my chat today. Sorry. I don't need like the I don't have time to go through and like walk you through like basic conversational shit. Sorry, you figure that out on your own time.
I do not think that he is going to allow that. I don't think he's going to let anyone get mad at him. Also based on the reaction of his fans, that I said I was upset with him, and there's no sense of like, oh,
Max isn't saying he's figured out Byron's problems, just that he has a read on some basic conversational aspects of his personality. No, you're wrong. When you say like this is a person that avoids confrontation, he has no basis to say that yet. That hasn't been established. You need way more in a conversation to figure out if somebody's avoidant of confrontation. There's no way that in a few minutes you've already figured out like, oh, this person needs to be made angry. Like you just don't have enough information for that yet. You don't.
Well, yeah, of course. He welcomes negative feedback and negative emotions. You can be mad at Dr. K. That's a totally natural response. I don't get that. I get frantic, almost freakish defensiveness and protectiveness. Well, I am mad. And yeah, so I guess we'll see where he goes with that.
He explicitly says he wouldn't say those things to Reckful. Okay, we're going to re-listen to this entire thing. Sorry.
Sure.
Because it sounded to me like he said, if I was talking to him, this is what I would say. Hold on, Pixel Fish is also getting permabanned if this is not the case. Because it sounds explicitly like he said, if I was talking to him, this is what I would say.
Okay.
Prozac.
Okay.
And I've tried a couple things. I've tried like I was on a really high dose of lithium at one point.
How did that make you feel?
Very bland. Yeah, the same thing people always say, like kind of dead. You know, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then God, I've tried a bunch of other ones, but they're not super memorable. One of them gave me like some eye pain, so I had to stop taking it because I was really sensitive to light. Maybe you know which one I'm talking about.
Okay.
I don't know. I tried a bunch of different ones. This is like 14 years ago, most of it. So now I don't really remember.
Okay.
But
has medication ever been helpful?
So the only thing that's been really helpful is when I was in Amsterdam, I took psilocybin, and it really worked for me.
So this is fascinating. So the FDA
Okay, we're 3 minutes in,
just
and Dr.
today-
K is talking about the FDA. He's talking about medication. He's asking him about his reaction to different drugs. This is a medical conversation. He is claiming he is not acting as a medical professional, but Reckful knows that Dr. K is in fact a doctor, and when he's having this conversation.
It's such an intense feeling. It's kind of hard to explain, but it let me get out of these like thought loops that I was in that were causing me to be sad.
Yep.
And I just step back and see things in a new perspective.
Okay. So today's supposed to be a stream about meditation, and Reckful, I'm going to ask you a couple of other questions. But if it's okay with you guys, we're going to talk about that and like what's happening in your mind and why psilocybin is helpful and how you can cultivate that sensation without using psilocybin.
Okay.
So the first thing is like this phrase, thought loop, I love. So why don't you explain to people what is a thought loop?
Okay, you'd explain it better, but just certain things, you're going along through your day and a certain thing happens and it always causes you to think in the same pattern of a certain negative feeling at the end. And I always hear it described as, it's like an icy mountain with the sleds. A lot of sleds have gone down, and then there's these patterns of form that your mind tends to go down one of these paths of the sleds. Yep. And then when you're on psilocybin, it seems like it doesn't. It's just kind of free to think whatever.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so let's talk about thought loops for a second. So the first thing to understand is...
Okay, 4 minutes and 43 seconds in. If I were talking to Reckful, if I were his therapist, or if I were trying to be his fake therapist, where I'm at with him is that Reckful has a lot of trouble expressing anger. He's a people pleaser, he's nice, he's anxious, and I would probably assume that at some point I need Reckful to get mad at me. I need to let him get mad at me.
Okay. Email me in 1 month, maybe, and you'll get unbanned. I don't understand where, I don't know if it's like MrGirl that brings out like these types of people, or if there's just like some, no, it's not just him, because it happens sometimes with political commentators too. You guys will just say shit like, oh, I don't think this is what they meant. I just go somewhere else. Go watch another streamer. It's like, I don't know why I just had to waste time re-listening to exactly what I just heard and repeated verbatim, but okay.
Maybe even make him mad at me, and then I need to show him that it's okay for him to be mad at me. It's okay for him to be so mad that he hangs up on me. He tells me, fuck you, I never want to see you again. And then the next week at our next scheduled session, I am still there. That is my impression. Based on the little I've seen of Dr. K so far, just I think one full session with Melina and some short clips, I do not think that he is going to allow that. I don't think he's going to let anyone get mad at him. Also based on the reaction of his fans, that I said I was upset with.
The idea of making somebody get mad at you or figuring out that you need to do that also in the first session as a therapist, I guess I'm curious which therapist he's talked to, but this is probably one of the more challenging aspects of being a therapist. My guess is that if you get clients mad at you that quickly or in a first session, a lot of them probably would just never come back. I would be surprised if you'd have very many clients for very long. They'd probably just leave.
And there's no sense of like, oh, well, yeah, of course, he welcomes negative feedback and negative emotions. You can be mad at Dr. K. That's a totally natural response. I don't get that. I get
people pleaser and expressing anger are Max's own demons. He's projecting hard. Yeah, I'm not trying to say he's projecting, but it feels a little bit like it. But maybe not. I haven't seen enough of Max to be like, oh, this is definitely projection. But
almost freakish defensiveness and protectiveness. Well, I am mad. And yeah, so I guess we'll see where he goes with that. But the conflict avoidance, well, whatever he fucking doesn't work. So I guess I have obviously that bias. But yeah, that's what I would be doing.
Okay. Yeah, so let's talk about thought loops for a second. So the first thing to understand is that it's a repetitive pattern of thinking that sort of leads you to the same place every time, but then you take the ski lift back to the top of the mountain and then you just go back down it again.
Yes.
Right? So like this is important to understand because your mind thinks that it's doing productive.
Do you think there's a world where Dr. K stays Reckful? Well, here's another issue too that you have to keep in mind. It might be that Dr. K's therapy was actually really good for Reckful. It might have been that Reckful would have committed suicide in a week. You know, maybe Dr. K put that off for some number of months or a year. I don't know how long they were talking. That could be the case. We don't know. But it's a little bit, you can't really say like Dr. K failed because we don't know what another world would have looked like. There might have been one where Reckful killed himself way sooner. It's kind of hard to say.
Thinking, but it's not doing productive thinking. It's just thinking the same shit over and over again. So I kind of think about thought loops like chewing gum. Like they're working, but there's no nutrition. There's no actual resolution and there's no benefit. You're just chewing the same shit over and over and over again.
Okay.
The other
Yeah.
thing is, in your case, like, I would imagine that your thought loops are focused on yourself, right? They're about you.
My thought loops are
Okay. He doesn't know what thought loop he's talking about. I don't even. Telling someone within 5 minutes of meeting them, 5.5 minutes of meeting them, that you can intuit what their thought loops are about, and that their thought loops, because they call them thought loops, you therefore know that they're not productive or that there's no point. It almost sounds like he's saying there's no point in even discussing what the thought loops are.
I agree that assuming the thought loops are about Reckful is probably not good, but but I mean, like, hasn't MrGirl like assumed that Reckful is a people pleaser and needs him to be made to be angry? It seems like he's making a lot of the same assumptions. I would say Dr. K's priming here is probably not very good. You should probably ask instead. But
Reckful already, again, strikes me as extremely compartmentalized. So telling him that some of his thoughts don't matter, or are not real, or are not productive, or
thought loops by definition aren't generally productive. I don't know of a single person ever in my entire life who's ever described a thought loop as a productive thing, or anybody that enjoys, like, thought loops by definition are like ruminating unproductive thoughts. I don't know. Maybe there's another type of thought loop that I might be unfamiliar with. I've never heard of it, if that is the case. Do I just need to keep coming back in here looking for the monastery people?
that they're like isolated and not connected to anything. Just seems like he's reinforcing the belief that some of his thoughts are not his, and then connected to that is the idea that some of his feelings are not his, and that this like alienness that he feels inside him, that he's right to feel that. Basically, there doesn't seem to be any plan to try to connect Reckful to himself. I'm gonna start calling him Byron.
are about me. I have to think about it if that's true.
That was a lot.
So what are the thought loops I have?
Yeah, so let's start there.
Usually they have to do with leading back to everything has no purpose, something like that, I think.
Okay.
But
Great.
then at the same time, even when I'm happy, I don't mind the thought that everything has no purpose. So that's a strange. It seems contradictory.
It's
You know,
it's
so
not.
It's not. Okay. Tell me
It
why.
does seem contradictory.
Obama.
Okay. So because this is so let me ask you. Okay, we're gonna get weird, Reckful. Do you believe that life? What do you think of? What's your sense of like what life is?
I'm an organism that came to be from two other organisms who
Sure.
liked each other enough to
Have a child.
have a baby. Yeah.
And is that is that all you are? You're just a biological organism?
And I have consciousness, which we can't really explain, the hard problem,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, so
And
what does
yeah.
that mean? Like, what do you think about your life? Like, do you feel like your life has purpose?
Most of the time, no, but recently I've started to think yes, because I realize I can start trying to help other people who have had my same problems, so I relate to them. And then I hope by making this game I'm working on that they can find friendship and a sense of community. Because I'm making an MMO, like a really,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, that's awesome, man.
Things I wanted as a kid. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna just dive into Sanskrit for a second, okay? So Sanskrit.
Okay, so we're 7 minutes in, and he's already telling him, by implication, are you just a biological organism? Is that all you are? And basically implying that he is going to use spirituality to give Byron a sense of purpose in his life, even though he just said he is not a spiritual person. So again,
I don't know if he said he's going to give him a sense of
I
purpose,
have major
but
problems with this.
jeez.
He's drowning in depression, and you're offering him a oar to grab onto, and except he has the motivation to try to please you and make you feel like you did a good job. He's also very aware of the audience, and he wants to please them as well. And so you're going to tell him some shit about your spirituality, and he is going to say it makes a lot of sense and that it's helpful, but probably throw up some signs of resistance or hesitance. And you're gonna roll right over it.
The yogis, like back in ancient India, like thousands of years ago, basically started to believe that the world was false. And the reason that they started to believe the world was false is because they sort of understood that like the sense organs can be falsified, so either through the use of hallucinogens or dreams. But ultimately, that the experience that they have within a dream is actually the same experience that you have within reality. That even though a dream can be fake or real, your experience of a dream is the same as your experience of life. Like, you can feel suffering, you can feel joy, you can feel hope, you can feel sorrow, abject terror. And so what they realized is that, like, ultimately the foundation of reality is actually consciousness. And that the foundation of reality is experience, and that the external world is false.
Yeah, I've listened to The Case Against Reality. Maybe you've heard that. Dan Hoffman, I think.
I haven't heard that one in particular, but there's a lot of stuff from quantum mechanics that supports this. I don't know if Dan Hoffman.
Telling a depressed person who's, again, has a history of suicide in the family, who has not been able to be prescribed antidepressants. You are a doctor. You've already discussed medication. You have now known him for 8 minutes and 43 seconds, and you are saying the sentence, "The external world is false." It's it's amazing how much more at this point Byron knows about you than you know about him.
I just this feels like such a stretch. Trying to think of how irresponsible I want my statements to be. Because I could make a lot of assumptions about Max at this point. Or I could make a lot of assumptions. I think, here's something I'll say, like, generally. When people are super depressed and they feel, if that's moving them in a direction of suicidality, I don't necessarily think that, like, hearing some piece of logic is going to be like, oh, that's like the key that I needed and now I can kill myself. I think that these are way more deeply rooted. Emotional beliefs, emotionally grounded things than like intellectually grounded things. To prepare for this conversation, I actually watched Reckful's last stream the other day, and last night. And something that I think is very hard to understand is it feels like when you're mentally well adjusted, good experiences are fun experiences because you have fun, and then afterwards you're like, that was fun. If you go and so for instance, if you're like a normally mentally well adjusted person, if you go and you hang out with your friends, that's usually an elevated experience, and then there's kind of this like come down of a high afterwards. When you go home, you're like, today was a really good day. I hung out with my friends. We had a lot of fun. I'm going to go to sleep, and that's awesome. I get this feeling, partially based on my personal conversation with Byron, which might be cheating, but even watching his stream for the last day before he killed himself, and then I get this feeling in general with people with depression. When you are having fun, it doesn't really feel as much like you're having fun. It's like a distraction from your normal state of being that is empty and hollow. So when you are, how would I describe this? I want to use drug analogies, but you guys haven't done all the drugs. There are good come downs from being high, where you're like, that was super fun, and now I'm coming down. Mushrooms or LSD, I would describe this, like, that was cool. And then there are bad come downs from being high. I would say probably like opiates, MDMA for sure, things like heroin, right? where as soon as you lose it, you're like, oh no, I'm going back to like this horrible thing. So what happens is when you are like a super mentally fucked person, you're not actually, or it doesn't necessarily feel like you're out having fun. It feels like you're distracting yourself from your ordinary existence. And that kind of like thought can follow you through to everything. And when I look at like Reckful's last day of talking to people, I think he was saying like, all right, guys, like I'm going to go offline and then I'm going to, you know, try to find something to watch and fall asleep. I don't know. I could be hearing this maybe, or I could be like totally inventing this. I acknowledge it. But when I hear him talk, it almost sounds not bittersweet, but like sad that he knows that like the distraction that I just had is leaving me. And I know that when I turn my stream off and I try to find something, like that empty, hollow feeling is going to come back. And now I'm back there again. And that's what my whole life is, unless I can distract myself with some fun thoughts otherwise. That's the lens through which I view people that have like depression or things like GAD or whatever. This is like the daily experience. It's not like this intellectual justification for like, man, if there's no external world, I can kill myself. It's a way more deeply rooted emotional feeling than just than just like a intellectual kind of thing, I would say. If I was to be critical of anything for Dr. K in this conversation, the 8 minutes that I've listened to so far, if I was talking to somebody and I was trying to get to the root of like what Reckful's talking about, if I say like, tell me about yourself, like where's your place in the world, and I was to get an answer like Reckful is hyper autistic. More autistic than I am, but we were similarly autistic, because I might give an answer like that. No, I wouldn't, because I'm not that autistic. Where it's like, what do you see yourself? What's your purpose in life? It's like, well, 2 people created me, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no. I don't give a fuck about that. Tell me, what do you feel like your purpose in life is? And he kind of got to it at the end. Well, I want to make a game that other people like, because I feel like I'm kind of helping other people. I think that on another aside, I think that when you're mentally ill, I think that one of the best feelings in the world, this is true of non-mentally ill people, is people really, really, really like to be understood. And one of the biggest problems with mental illness is you really don't have anybody that understands you, because people think you're sad, and you're not sad. Being sad or depressed for a reason is fucking awesome. Like if I can say like I'm sad because my dog died, that's cool. I know what made me sad, and eventually those conditions will be ameliorated, and then you're gone. You're not sad anymore. It's much, much, much worse to be sad for no reason, because now you're just sad, and that's like your default state of mind, and there's not even a reason behind it. You just are. It's your state. It's your default state of being. So I feel like circling back on the Dr. K conversation. When Reckful says that he likes to like make other people feel good because of his problems, I think he's looking to some extent for other people that understand the things that he feels. Number one. And then number two, I think Dr. K should be having a more emotional conversation. Don't intellectualize this. When I ask you about who you are, I don't care about your like intellectual view of like existence. Or I don't care about the hard problem of consciousness or any of that. Like talk to me about like, what do you feel? I think that would be my primary criticism of Dr. K here. But there might be a variety of reasons why he's not going into that type of conversation. I can't truly know. But okay, Jesus. Oof, okay.
Talks about that.
Destiny making way too many generalizations right now. Sometimes I make a lot of generalizations that are hasty. If I do, I'll tell you, none of the generalizations that I just made were hasty, and all of them are extremely true. If you don't know that, it's just because you haven't gotten old enough to learn it yet. I will tell you, this is just a factual statement. If you don't agree with me, you're wrong, and eventually you'll learn it, or you'll always be a shitty person and you'll never learn it. People love to be understood. Everybody loves to be understood. It's one of the reasons why I work so well with other people in a real life setting, because I feel like I give people a place for me to understand them. Anybody, like, it's one of the reasons why when we watch people go into interrogation rooms, I've said this a lot, JCS and other people never point this out, or they don't pick up on it. I think that one of the reasons why, when you get a lot of these lunatics in interrogation rooms, why they talk so much is because it's probably for the first time in their life, they're sitting across the table from somebody that actually super cares about everything they have to say. And I really get that feeling when I watched, like, it was that incel shooter, it was a couple other the big conspiracy people, where you got a guy like, yeah man, tell me, like, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that, or like, why do you think women do this, or why do you think Elliot Rodgers said that, or whatever. And I think that they actually genuinely get this feeling of like, holy shit, for the first time in my life, because a lot of these people are loners, a lot of these people don't have friends or family that listen to them or understand them, they're actually getting a person that is talking to you, trying to understand how you feel. It is one of the best feelings in the world, is having somebody that feels like they're genuinely trying to understand you. And mental illness is unfortunately a qualia, a feeling, a sensation that if you haven't experienced it firsthand, it's very, 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 very hard for you to relate to another person's feelings. And I would say, now this is a generalization that might not be true. I'll say this is a generalization that might be true. But I would go on to argue that one of the worst parts about mental illness isn't all of the ordinary horrible feelings that go along with mental illness. One of the worst parts is that you actually genuinely feel cut off from a lot of humanity because people don't understand what you're experiencing. They don't understand what you feel. I would describe it as like you're literally at the bottom of a pit watching people walk by above you and you have no access to them and they have no access to you. That they genuinely do not understand your experience. And that feeling, irrespective of every other bad feeling you have, is on its own a very, very, very horrible feeling that nobody actually understands you when you say like, I'm depressed. They're hearing like, I'm sad because of something. Or when you say like, I have anxiety, you know, they might quote to you like, Alan Watts says so many stupid things. He's like, oh, well, anxiety is when you worry about not worrying. Anxiety is when you worry for no reason at all. Well, kind of, but that's not true. Anxiety is my body has the physiological response of like feeling anxious. I have no fucking idea why. It's not even because I'm not worrying about anything. It's just like I wake up and like my heart feels like it's pounding in my chest. I don't even know why, right? That's anxiety. It's not like this like, oh, well, I'm worrying because I'm not worrying about it, blah, blah. No, that's bullshit. That sounds like some shit somebody's saying that has never had anxiety before. But yeah, I think that lack of understanding is a really big issue that people with mental illness especially have. I am generalizing here. I think so. But I think people in general also like love to be understood. But okay.
Okay. Let me make sure that's his name.
A good example of like understanding this from a quantum mechanics perspective, which there's an argument against what I'm about to say, which I'm happy to go into if people are interested. But basically that reality exists as a probability, and it's the act of observation that causes a probability to collapse into a reality, which is sort of a weird, complicated thing to say. But
Wait, say it one more time.
So that reality actually exists as a probability, like reality is not static, and that the act of observation causes a probability to collapse into a reality.
God, I hate the misciting of like the uncertainty principle and everything having to do with quantum waveforms and the many worlds that, well, it's actually when we make, I just wish that nobody would ever talk about quantum physics. Okay, I'm sorry. But anyway, go ahead.
So that
Okay.
like the world exists as a probability waveform, and when you
Okay. So now you're getting into some like uncertainty principle shit about quantum mechanics. Right after this guy told you his life has no meaning, and so you're doing this thing where when he's sad, you are telling him to switch into this extremely abstracted, literally mathematical lens through which to look at reality, so that essentially nothing matters, and his feelings about his life are now unanchored and make no sense. And I mean, I see people do this all the time. I just don't. It's like a schizo rant to teach him how to escape his thoughts. And this is already a guy who cannot sit with himself, who you can tell just by looking at him, he feels guilty for having bad feelings. And now you're telling him how to basically eject out of his own brain.
He makes so many big reads on people without
hyper-intellectualize them so
Jesus.
that he does not feel them, and in this case, so that he can please you by not feeling them.
you observe something, that probability disappears and it becomes a reality.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've read some quantum mechanics stuff, like Sean Carroll or whatever.
Yeah, so like Schrodinger's cat, I think, is the best example of this. But then there was this experiment called the double slit experiment, which actually proved that observation.
That one's really weird.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
Okay, fuck. I always look this up so I don't get this wrong. I don't think that observation. It's not that Okay. Here's what people think, okay? People think that observation changes reality. And what that means is that when a conscious observer watches something, reality is actually changing. But I'm pretty sure all it states is that you can't know the position and velocity of a particular thing at any point in time because, like, by shooting a photon at it, you're necessarily changing one of these properties, right? That's all it means, no? Am I incorrect on that? Or people seem to take it as meaning that, like, human conscious observers are changing reality, and they make it way, way, way more spiritual than it is. But that's not actually. It's just saying you can't know the position and velocity of a particle at the same time. You can't know both of those things at the same time. It's impossible. Because like the process of observing something or shooting photons at stuff will change like the outcome of one of those things. But people make this very spiritual, which is kind of annoying, but whatever.
What do you remember about it?
Double slit experiment. okay, they shoot electrons through the two slits. If they look at the electrons, they show up on the other side as like in a certain pattern, and if they don't look at it, they show up in a different pattern.
Yeah,
Something
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
So they show up as an interference pattern if you don't look at which of the slits the photon goes through, right? So it's like the bands of light and dark, and then if you observe which slit the photon goes through, then the pattern on the other side disappears. So literally, like, what you see depends on where you look. Like, if I'm looking at
bizarre.
the slit.
Okay, but I think that has to do with shooting photons at things, right? Or it has to do with like you're changing a system by measuring it. It's not just like, because this is always presented as like a human consciousness will alter that. You don't even need a human looking at this, right? You can make the observations with a machine and it would change. This doesn't need a human being to look at it. People, I just don't think you should ever talk about, you should just never mention QM ever. Or always mention it, because you can make it whatever you want it to be. But okay.
Then I only see one point of light, and if I'm not looking at the slit, then I actually see an interference pattern. Right?
Yeah, it's bizarre. So what's your interpretation of it?
That consciousness creates reality. It's what the yogis have been saying for thousands of years.
This is so wrong, but
that the act of observation, that our consciousness has creative power. Now, the interesting thing is that if you...
I've never heard that. It's so it's like the first most like misquoted thing relating to quantum mechanics. The second most misquoted thing has to do with the concept of entanglement, where entanglement basically means if you have two particles that are quote unquote entangled, even if you separate them at an infinite point, by measuring one, you can get information about the other instantly. But when people hear that, they think, oh my God, information travels faster than light. But no, once you've measured it, you've changed it. You can't change one to change the other. That's not what entangled means. Entangled doesn't mean across infinite distances. It just means that it's like if you measure the spin of one, you'll know at that point in time what the spin of the other is. These are like it's this, and then there's one other thing. Everybody always takes these quantum mechanics concepts and they like make them to mean like either spiritual things or like super science things, and that's not what they mean. But whatever. If it lets people explore fun philosophical concepts, I guess they can. But just anytime somebody brings up QM, just always be wary, okay? Just be wary, okay?
So now we get to Sanskrit, and this is kind of a real roundabout way of getting to this idea. So the yogis actually came up with two words for reality. One is Maya. Maya means illusion. And the other is Leela. And Leela means play. And so interestingly enough, both of these sort of imply a falseness to the universe. But I think what's happening is, on some sense, you've had an experience either through psilocybin or other things, and I suspect other things, and we'll get to that later, that has given you a sense that something about the...
It does mean infinite distance. Yeah, hold on, wait. All I'm saying is that somebody in chat made a really good analogy, okay? If I give you a box of shoes, but I take one shoe out, we can go across the universe, and you can open a box, and you can instantaneously know if I took the left shoe or the right shoe. You can know that, because now you've like actually observed the system. But you can't, there's no way to transfer information back to me. You can't change the direction. Like, as soon as you've made the observation, you've gotten that piece of information, and now you're done. That's it. That's all you can do, is you can make a single observation. I don't remember for entanglement, I think this had to do with the spin of a particle or whatever, and then you can tell the spin of the entangled particle once they've been separated. But you can't transfer information back and forth, is all I'm saying. We're done talking about this. Okay.
World is not real. And what happens is when
I have had it many times, yeah.
When you're happy, yeah, we'll get to that. When you're happy,
and
you can exist in a Leela.
Okay, we're now 11 and a half minutes in, and you are telling Byron that a lot of things. One, you're teaching him Sanskrit words, which there's no reason for him to know those words, or that he would. And it's almost like a hypnotist technique, where you're giving him the sense that like you're teaching him, you're explaining things, you're like the guide of the conversation. And like I can understand why you should be guiding it, but you have known him for 11 and a half minutes, and it's like you know more about him than he does. You know more about his life than he does, and you're going to explain his life to him. And he has literally told you, I think, essentially nothing at this point. And it just seems like a pre-made speech or a pre-written speech that you
hold on. I'm serious. This is the last comment I'm making this, then we're done. Destiny, this is a key question of philosophy, science, and quantum mechanics, blah, blah, blah. It has nothing in quantum physics talks about a conscious observer. That is exclusively a science fiction concept. We're done talking about this, okay? There has never been anything that I've ever heard of. I'll say that because I'm not a fucking physicist, okay? But there's never anything that I've heard of in quantum physics that like when a conscious observer observes something, that's not the case. Observation usually just means like adding energy to a system to pull some piece of information out of it, right? That is generally the case. It's way, way, way more boring than when a conscious observer watches something, the universe changes to accommodate that observer. Yeah, okay. Stop. I'm done talking about this. Okay. Okay.
Giving to him whatever one he triggered, as if it is a video game.
State, which is like, it's no big deal that the world isn't real. It's play. Like, let's just have a good time. It's actually just like a video game. Like, just
it's like an experience machine.
Yeah, and just because a video game isn't real doesn't mean that we can't enjoy it, right? In fact, quite the opposite. That's actually a big problem for most of my audience.
Yeah, you don't need to know how the game works even to enjoy playing it. We always are trying to figure out how life works.
Now we have to be careful, because even though you can appreciate Leela, which is play, and you can appreciate that nothing in the world is real, when your depression acts up, and I want you to understand that depression is like a pattern of thinking within your mind. It takes the things that you know and distorts them. So it takes the fact, it hijacks this idea that you know that the world is like not a real place in some sense. And then it sort of makes you feel like there's no purpose because nothing is real. But that's an understanding that doesn't actually mean like anything bad. It's just, that's what the depression does. The depression hijacks your thinking and takes the things that you know and spins them in a particular way that like actually makes you suffer.
Yes, but then I was also saying that even when I'm happy and even if I thought reality was an illusion, I could still be happy at those moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? But those are...
I feel like in this case, and now I don't know, so I'm going to make a couple of very strong generalizations here. Warning, this might all be bullshit, and I fully admit that, okay? Okay, hold on. I'm not getting triggered by chat. This might be bullshit. I implore you, proceed cautiously. I'm telling you, okay? I think it is very, 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 very hard, maybe bordering on the impossible, to understand mental illness without having experienced it yourself. And I've kind of wondered personally, I don't think I would ever say this has to be the case, but I've wondered if you can ever even actually truly treat somebody or talk to somebody with mental illness if you haven't experienced it yourself. And the only reason I say that is because I get worried sometimes that if you don't have a mental illness, it might be possible that you're intellectualizing too much, and you might even try to trick the other person into being able to intellectualize it. Like, the conversation that's happening with Byron right now is a very intellectual one. I don't think you can intellectualize your emotions. I don't think you can think your way through it. It's not like that. Or like, if you can think your way through it, it's in a very, very, very roundabout way of like thinking to change habits, to change lifestyles that will inevitably go back to change how you feel about things. But it's in a very like CBT, very circular or triangular technically way. You can't just like think like, oh, I have a new perspective on my depression now. Like, oh, okay, this is cool. I understand this better. Like, I'm going to not be as miserable anymore. I think that I would argue, from my bullshit perspective, I would argue that that's probably not the best way to go about it, because I don't think people intellectualize themselves into these like mental illness states. So I don't think you can intellectualize your way out of it. But
that's because when you're able to step outside of depression, when you're able to step outside of yourself, you can appreciate that like life can be happy and joyous even though it isn't real. But when your depression kicks in, you become nihilistic. So
I don't understand. If life isn't real, then what is real? Isn't realness just relative? So also, I don't understand telling someone that that life isn't real. I can understand telling someone that you believe life isn't real 13 minutes after you meet them, maybe. But I can't understand telling someone that life objectively isn't real. It just doesn't make any fucking sense.
Nihilism is this idea that like life has no purpose and no meaning, so we might as well fuck around, which actually isn't the case. So first, Reckful, why don't you tell me a little bit about what happens in your mind? Any questions about this?
No, that I followed. I mean, okay.
Any questions about what the meaning of life? You're extraordinarily arrogant. Also, he seems to have thought about this stuff just as much as you have, and I don't think he sees things the same way. As you said, you asked him what life is. You asked him to define life, and he said, "I'm an organism created by two other organisms. So there's me, and my parents loved each other enough to make me." That's what he said, or liked each other enough. And you now just talked for 5 minutes, and then you're like, any questions about the new meaning of life that I just told you about? Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
It does follow that what we see as reality is not base reality for sure, because if you think how a different animal, let's say we look at an ant, they're not going to perceive reality anything similarly to how we do. They perceive reality in a way that helps them survive, and we perceive reality in a way that helps us survive, right? Let's say we have to notice lion running at us or whatever, and we have to notice motion more than other things, or like back in the day, and the people who actually saw too many things or saw base reality wouldn't.
So like this is all true, but Reckful is talking about like these are like very high level concepts, or not high level, but like these are very far removed from like concepts of mental illness or whatever, right? The idea of like are our senses supposed to report reality to us? These are like interesting questions, but I don't think this is an appropriate conversation relating to like mental health. Like I don't think we're talking about that at all. This is like a philosophy conversation now. So it seems a little weird to be in this area, but I mean like they're not like none of this is like wrong. It just I don't know what relevance this has to like Byron's like mental states, but I'm never going to find another 100% person. Is he not just explaining different perspectives of life, engaging what he describes himself to? Yeah, this could just be also, this could be his way of just trying to gain a feel of like what Byron believes. So he's just having the conversation, seeing what kind of answers he gets before he like dives in deeper too, which would probably be okay. Because you're meeting him at a level that he's comfortable talking at. Like obviously he enjoys the conversation. He's thought about it before. You're giving him maybe a different way to think of things. Maybe it's just a way to gauge all of that, to have like a more casual conversation before getting like deeper into things, you know?
Survived, you know, if the natural selection would favor people who just see certain things more, like the threats.
So now that segues into an important point, which is that you're
not listening to him at all. You're just looking at.
Do people not intellectualize themselves into depression? I would say no. I feel like the mental process is significantly different than being sad or thinking that you're sad. Something that's hard to explain is that it feels like in all the normal human emotions, there's like a circle of like, these are like the things that people normally feel. Like, so it could be anger, it could be sadness, it could be happiness, it could be orgasms, it could be excitedness, whatever. Like these are all the things. But like for people that are mentally ill, there's like this further level of things that don't feel like anything else that you've ever felt before. So I would put like depression as one of these things. Like if I were to ask you, or if I were to, well, there are some people that if I were to ask, what does depression feel like? They could tell me. But I think if I were to ask a person that's truly depressed, like, what does depression feel like? You can try to reach for words like, well, it kind of feels hollow, it kind of feels empty, but it's not really any of those things. It's a way type of all-encompassing different feeling that becomes like the foundation of all of your other thoughts in a way that just feeling sad isn't. Like, feeling sad is like a thing up here that I can change, but like being depressed is a thing down here that every single thought I have in my mind is already like tainted by that before I even have those thoughts. Like some of these feelings of mental illness are way more all-encompassing than like I've had an experience and this is my emotional reaction, or I've thought about a thing and now this is how I feel about it. It's a much deeper, it's a much deeper, more foundational experience that I wouldn't even call a thought. Yeah.
Your fucking chat while he's talking about his views on like evolution and reality, how we perceive reality different from animals. You're just not listening at all.
Mind is designed to survive. It's not actually designed to protect you from suffering.
Yes.
Okay. So this is one of the most simple things that like I think a lot of people I disagree with a lot of my colleagues in the sense that my impression of a lot of mental illness is that it's actually functional, useful mechanisms of our mind that
I could believe that
are kind of out of whack or haywire. So anxiety is a good example of our mind's ability. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with you because I was just saying on my stream earlier today that anxiety actually could get passed on as a trait from natural selection because it could help. Let's say you're always worried someone's going to kill you. You could have 1,000 years ago survived because of that, and then
Absolutely.
that trait could pass on. Yeah.
So let's just tap into just for 1 second what anxiety is. And I've talked a lot about anxiety. So we're going to talk more about depression today. But what I understand anxiety to be is that anxiety is simply your mind's ability to look into the future and predict problems. That's all it is.
Okay.
It's just the future predicting capability.
So I don't know how he means this. Maybe he's gonna get into this, but I have to go. We're gonna do this conversation. Oh, fuck, I didn't get to watch this. I hope they don't bring this conversation up too much. I don't know what Dr. K's. And you, honest to God, you should probably just believe him over me. I'll give that forewarning. You should probably just believe him over anything I say. I don't like the describing of anxiety in the mental illness sense in the same sense as anxiety of like the nervous for a thing sense. Like when I'm anxious for like a school test, I have an exact thing that I know why I'm anxious about it. Or if I'm about to go on a scary roller coaster, right? I'm anxious. My physiology and all of it is elevated. Cortisol, blood pressure, or not blood pressure, pulse, everything is elevated because there's a specific thing that I'm having anxiety about. And I know that. And I might even have a lot of anxiety in the long term because of like, I've got a lot of tests, I've got a lot of things coming up. Sure. And I know that. Okay. But I think that is fundamentally different. That is such a different experience than you wake up, the sun is shining, you don't really have anything to worry about, but it feels like there's just like an elephant standing on your chest and you have no idea why. You have no idea. You don't have any problems. Nothing is really going on that's bad. You don't have anything to look forward to that's going on. Like everything should be fine. But there's just like there's like something like sitting on your chest. And that kind of anxiety, I think, I hate. This is always one of my biggest like criticisms of psychology. I hate that they use the same words because I feel like that kind of anxiety has nothing to do with like the anxious fight or flight feeling you get about being scared of like a scary roller coaster ride or being scared that you have like a big test coming up in school. It's like a fundamentally different thing that isn't even like, I guess they're kind of related in that like maybe you have like a sort of similarish feeling in the body, but it's so different in my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. Fuck, I have to hop in and have this conversation, I think. How do you know about this stuff? You experience yourself? I did a lot of drugs when I was 30. I've never had mental health issues until I did a lot of drugs. And then in the year afterwards, I had some issues related to some things. I think I got some interesting perspective about it, which I guess is kind of helpful. But it changed I was pretty good at like saying the right words, I think, to like, because people would email me explaining experience. Oh, this is what this feels like, blah, 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 blah. But I think I have a little bit of firsthand experience with some things. And I think it's dramatically changed the way that I personally feel about these, even if the words I use are still a little bit similar. But also your mileage may vary. Maybe you have different experiences. It's all, you know.